Here. Oh, here, let's do more Navalny stuff.
Outrage after one of Vladimir Putin's sharpest critics, Russian opposition leader Alexey Navalny, was reported dead in a Russian prison, reportedly dying after taking a walk, a fatal walk. U.S. officials are still waiting to confirm the Russian state media.
I mean, come on. That happens all the time. He was probably vaccinated. He probably got that Moderna, you know what I'm saying? Which is really funny to say about Vladimir Putin, by the way, because he is a massive fucking COVID nut. Remember when Putin literally would not even like... Putin was very afraid of COVID for himself personally. The CIA did it 100%. That's insane. Come on, dude. Why would the CIA kill their own asset when they can just like keep him alive?
Claim. Navalny's wife had this to say just a short time ago in front of dozens of heads of state.
If it is the truth, I would like Putin and all his staff, everybody around him, his government, his friends, I want them know that they will be punished for what they have done with our country, with my family, and with my husband. They will be brought to justice, and this day will come soon.
What strength to stand there in Munich. With us now, CNN's chief international correspondent Clarissa Ward and Matthew Chance, chief global affairs correspondent. Clarissa, you could see the anger and also the resolve from Alexei Navalny's wife there.
It was a very emotional moment, and she actually started out, John, by saying, you know, I thought for a moment, do I go home to my family right now, or do I stand here and address you? And then I asked myself, what would Alexei do? What would Alexei want me to do? And I have no doubt that he would want me to stand here to address you and to issue that withering rebuke to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Of course, at this stage, we don't know exactly what killed Alexei Navalny. We have only been told through Russian media that he took a walk at the penal colony where he was suffering.
I don't get why he fucking went back to Russia. Like, it makes no goddamn sense. Did he think that, like, he would be supported by a majority of people enough that, like, he could be kept alive or something? Like, I don't really understand it. Because it's like, bro, he got poisoned already. Bro, look, if the #1 poisoner can get to me pretty much anywhere around the planet, I'm definitely not going directly to Russia to be like, all right, go ahead. Sure, big guy. Sure, tough guy who poisoned me. Let's see what else you got. You know, give me your best shot. Famous last words before getting hit with the best shot.
Terrible treatment where he had at times been in less than good health, and yet when we saw him yesterday via teleconference from a courtroom, he appeared healthy, he appeared jovial. We've also heard a report from his mother, who told Novaya Gazeta, the Russian publication, that she wouldn't be accepting condolences because she couldn't believe it, because she had seen Alexei Navalny on February 14th, that he had appeared to be in good health and good humor. And so there are real questions about exactly what happened to him. But you heard also at the Munich Security Conference, the Vice President Kamala Harris saying, whatever happened, Russia is responsible. He was in the custody of the Russian state. And so
I mean, this part is 100% true.
the question really now becomes, what does this mean for Russia's opposition, which has already been so brutally stomped out?
What do you mean, what does this mean? It means that the last fucking dude who was any real opposition to Vladimir Putin is dead. There is no real opposition to Vladimir Putin in Russia. And yes, I mean literally, like, the Communist Party is also not real opposition to Vladimir Putin. It doesn't really change much, I think, with the internal dynamics in Russia either.
Does this mean, could we see potentially more protests or resurgence of the sort of protest movements that Alexey Navalny had previously galvanized in Russia? Or is this it? Is this the end? Is this message that there is absolutely no opposition of any shape or form to be tolerated inside Putin's Russia, John?
Yeah, and to that point, you heard from Alexey Navalny's.
I do think it's funny, though, that liberals are like, yeah, Navalny, great guy. He would be sick if he killed Vladimir Putin and became the leader of Russia. Not realizing that, like, okay, Vladimir Putin was our guy. Look at him now. Liberals have this, like, weird short-term way of thinking about, like, the ideological tendencies of those who are enemies of our enemies. And they just, like, they literally think in, like, 3-month spans. Okay? It's so weird. It is so odd. Okay, so was Putin, man. Look where that got us. You know what I mean? Yeah, liberals tend to think in, like, quarters. Too much capitalist thinking. Also, apparently journalists have been arrested in Moscow and St. Petersburg following the death of jailed Putin critic Alexey Navalny. Before people say these are like fucking assets or CIA or anything, no, the fuck they're not. Okay, I think that Navalny is basically like a placeholder for any kind of opposition to Vladimir Putin's reign, and it's perfectly valid and understandable to want to oppose Vladimir Putin. And I would say brave too, but it's just GG's.
Affairs editor Dominic Waghorn, his analysis of how the government in Russia clamps down on all forms of opposition. We have just had these pictures in, I believe, showing 2 Rus News journalists, it's a local news provider in Russia, being detained.
Isn't the Communist Party bigger than Navalny's? Some of you read like one Twitter thread and then come in here and be like, but you don't understand the Communist Party. Like, what do you mean? What the fuck? The Communist Party is not real opposition to Vladimir Putin. Every single party that is allowed to exist and operate without like being fucking poisoned is technically still controlled opposition. I know that the Communist Party is in existence in Russia. It doesn't mean anything, and they're not like a fucking real opposition party. Please. The moment that they become a real opposition party and not controlled opposition party, they will no longer exist. You're breaking some chatter's dreams? Yeah. I guess. Navalny was basically clip champ by state media out of context. It looked like he's far more right than he is. Bro, I'm sorry. It's going to be real hard for me to fucking get on board with that when I see the dude say that Muslims are cockroaches that need to be exterminated. That's like, what do you think was going on? You know what I mean? In that clip, like, was he like, hey guys, like leading up to the fucking clip, he said, hey, everything I'm about to say about Muslims, I do not believe. This is what the opposition to me says. Muslims are actually cockroach, and we must exterminate them with a gun. I do not believe this. He like paused after it. And then that's the clip? Is that what it is? What happened?
By authorities. Of course, people had been told by the authorities in Russia not.
Yeah, this is what is actually a good take. In the end, even if Navalny had nationalistic views originally and would probably be a bad president himself, he ultimately led meaningful resistance against Putin. The fact that he made so many people vote on a fake candidate to put on ballot by Putin frightens Putin. That part is the only correct part. It's that he was made to be the figurehead of like real opposition to Vladimir Putin. That's the actual take. He was seen as like the only standalone figurehead. Navalny is the 99% Hitler to Putin, pretty much. And I think that it's the optics of that as well. And that's probably why he may or may not have been murdered. You know. Sometimes you just fall out of a window, chat.
Not to come out in numbers, not to protest following the death of Mr. Navalny. The video in the aftermath of the death of the Russian opposition leader Alexey Navalny. Earlier we heard from our international affairs editor.
What did Navalny actually disagree with Putin about? Not being Vladimir Putin. I would go so far as to say that the worst thing you can be against Vladimir Putin is like be in line with his ideas and not be him, because there might be a lot of people that fucking don't even care about like Vladimir Putin's tendencies, but they don't like that he's been in power for so long, and then understandably notice his corruptions. Like, notice how corrupt he is. So from their perspective, it's like, okay, well, I like this guy's ideas. I also think Muslims are cockroaches that need to be exterminated, but at least this guy's not Vladimir Putin who's saying it. That's great. That is a terrifying prospect for a despot, a dictator. I guess the major difference between Russia with Vladimir Putin and Erdogan, who is like my own version of Vladimir Putin, is that Erdogan still holds elections, like real elections. Now, I like to say this so that people understand. Turkish elections are not fair. They are so unfair. They're completely fucking unfair. But they are, at the end of the day, free. Does that make sense? They're still utterly, unimaginably unfair. But they're still free. So there is still, like, unfortunately, a 51% coalition for Erdogan in this country. Okay? In Russia, no such thing exists.
Dominic Waghorn,
it does
his
not
analysis
exist.
of how the government in Russia clamps down on all forms of opposition. We have just had these pictures in, I believe, showing two Rus News journalists, it's a local news provider in Russia, being detained by authorities. Of course, people had been told by the authorities in Russia not to come out in numbers, not to protest following the death of Mr. Navalny. These pictures, we believe, show two journalists, Yulia Petrova being detained in Moscow. There are also pictures, we believe, I'm not sure that these are those, but there are other pictures showing the moments before the detention of another Rus News journalist, Alina Kozichin, in St. Petersburg. So clearly there is something of a protest taking place across Russia, something of a clampdown as well.
Wife saying that Vladimir Putin, Russia will be punished. I suppose, Matthew Chance, the question is, will they? Will Russians blame someone for this?
I mean, look, we don't know the answers to that yet. But look, I can tell you that many Russians that I've spoken to and or expressed their views in the media are expressing their shock that this has happened. That Alexey Navalny, who is undoubtedly the most high-profile opposition figure in the country, has died whilst in the custody of the Russian prison authorities. Now, whether that will have an impact in the way that Alexei Navalny has had an impact in the past, he's been able to bring out tens of thousands of people onto the streets in towns and cities across the country.
Here, let's look at some stuff here before you yell at me or whatever. Okay. They cry over Navalny while forgetting Jack Ruby. No, here, this is what I wanted to show you. Okay. No, Jeff's not here yet. Here, this is what I wanted to show you. You can't turn the stuffing back. What Navalny said about occupied Crimea. In the morning of August 20th, Russian opposition politician Alexey Navalny was hospitalized in intensive care, severe poisoning. Crimea is what? A sausage sandwich. In October 2014, Alexey Navalny gave an interview to the Echo of Moscow radio station. The meeting caused a stir among opposition supporters, mainly through Navalny's words about Crimea. To the question, are Crimea? The politician replied, Crimea is the people who live in Crimea, and that the peninsula was seized with a flagrant violation of all international norms, but is now part of Russia. Navalny advised Ukrainians not to deceive themselves. Crimea will remain a part of Russia and will never become a part of Ukraine again in the foreseeable future. Okay? He also said that when he becomes president of the Russian Federation, he will not return the semi-island to Kyiv. Crimea is what? A sandwich with sausage to be returned here and there, Navalny asked. Navalny's words surprised his supporters and other oppositionists. Some did not see anything new in his words, and others were disappointed by Navalny's policy. Like, Navalny's policy shift on Crimea may be too little too late. And then he changed his attitude on it. But at that point, it's like, it's fucking bullshit. Okay, but I love Western media says that Navalny was killed by Putin with 100% fact with evidence, regardless of if it was true or not. I mean, it's a very likely scenario. He said the same thing you said about Crimea. Yeah, I don't think you understand. I don't think you understand. The reason, when I say it, people fucking yell at me as I'm a Putin dick rider, dog. When I say it, people say, I love sucking Vladimir Putin's cock. When Navalny's saying the same thing, but they're fucking saying that he has like genuine disagreements with Vladimir Putin, when on a lot of issues he does not. He is like the anti-corruption and the attitude that he has, the attitude that he's displayed about like his actual positions in Ukraine or anything like that. Anything like that is is to show you that it's not. It's just he's just not Putin. That's it. That's the reason why Putin wanted to kill him, and that's the reason why a lot of people wanted to. A lot of people wanted to prop him up inside of Ukraine as I mean, not inside of Ukraine. Sorry, inside of Russia as well. That's it. And saying that Russia is responsible no matter what for his death is 100% correct because he's in the custody of the state. It's over. When you let someone fucking die, when they're in the custody of the state, it's their fault. It's the state's fault.
When he's called for them in the
even
past,
if they
but
don't
we're in a
directly kill
different
him, which I believe
environment
they
now.
probably did.
And there's been this chill descend over the Russian opposition, and this is yet another very potent message to opponents of the Kremlin about the terrible consequences that can befall you if you stand up to Vladimir Putin and his regime. Because remember, no matter how shocking this death of Alexey Navalny is, it's not altogether surprising. I mean, Alexey Navalny was himself poisoned and narrowly escaped death, a couple of years ago. He chose to come back to place himself at the center of Russian politics, having, narrowly escaped death himself. And then, of course, there's a long list of opponents of Putin, opponents of the Kremlin and its critics who have met, tragic ends. I mean, just last year, although perhaps I wouldn't describe it as a tragedy, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was a supporter of Putin turned somebody who staged a military uprising against Putin's authority. Well, he was killed in a plane crash under suspicious circumstances. Before that, the list goes on, but in 2015, I went to the funeral and covered the assassination of Boris Nemtsov, who was the sort of Alexei Navalny of his time, if you like. He was the most vocal critic, the most prominent opposition figure against the Kremlin. He was gunned down outside the walls of the Kremlin, and the list goes on. And so again, this is shocking, but it does fit into a pattern of critics of the Kremlin who meet sticky ends.
You cross Vladimir Putin, a lot of people end up dead. A lot of people have fallen out of windows, literally, or pushed. Who knows? Defenestration is an interesting word in Russia. Clarissa Ward, can you speak to the years of courage?
Bro, I'm sorry. That just kind of happens, dude. You're crazy.
That Alexei Navalny showed? It's something that you saw firsthand.
Well, the decision, John, to go back to Russia, when I interviewed him shortly after he was recuperating from being poisoned.
I do personally love the way liberals fucking talk about foreign adversaries versus our allies, though. Like, get this guy. I want to hear him speak on no uncertain terms like this about Israel's ethnic cleansing in Gaza. I want that shit so bad. You bulking, fam? 2.5 hour intervals between meals? This is my first meal of the day, you fucking jackass. What do you mean? Suck my dick. This is my first meal of the fucking day. What do you mean I'm bulking? What are you timing? If you're going to time me, at least listen. If you're going to literally autistically time what kind of fucking food I'm eating and how I'm consuming, at least be right. Don't be fucking wrong. Don't do it. Okay? Dumb bitch. I can't believe it. 2.5 hour fucking, are you trying to bulk? 2.5 hours in between the last time you ate is fucking so stupid. This is my first meal today.
Poisoned with Novichok. And I said, why would you go back? You know the risks. You know that they tried to kill you. But he was very sanguine about the risks. He was very determined to see and fulfill his mission, which he believed was to serve the Russian people. He understood implicitly that he could not do that in exile. He knew the risks, and yet he decided to go ahead and do what he felt was necessary and important to do. And I think that any criticism that one could possibly level at Alexei Navalny, certainly cowardice is not one of them. This is a man who is one of the most or was one of the most
You
extraordinary.
usually eat during the top news stories? No, everything I cover is important for someone. I eat at fucking 4 p.m. every day. Or sometimes 3 p.m. if I'm hungrier. That's it. So the reason why you think it's the most important news story is because you think this is the most important news story of the day. That's it. I already covered this news story, ironically, earlier in the day for hours, as a matter of fact. Damn, they're calling you a real eater in chat. Shit's crazy. Exactly.
Fairly courageous individuals, certainly that I have ever interviewed, John.
He walked into the fire. Clarissa Ward, Matthew Chance, thank you both so much for being with us. I know we're going to talk to you again very soon.
In 2021, US President Joe Biden warned Russian President Vladimir Putin that Moscow would face devastating consequences if Alexey Navalny were to die in prison. Here are Mr. Biden's remarks to the media about that conversation.
What do you say would happen if opposition leader Alexey Navalny dies?
I made it clear to him that I believe the consequences of that would be devastating for Russia.
Well, let's get to Arlette Saenz at the White House. What has been the response at this point?
Well, Becky, White House officials, administration officials have been stressing they are still working on actual confirmation of these reports that Alexei Navalny died while in prison in Russia. But they have expressed their belief that this is a terrible tragedy. We've also heard directly from Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who both said, even as they're waiting confirmation for these reports, that they believe Russia is responsible. We also know Blinken met privately with the wife of Alexei Navalny, Yulia, to express his condolences if these reports actually do pan out to be true. But it does come, as you heard from President Biden there, that he has warned Russian President Vladimir Putin directly that the consequences of Navalny dying in prison would be devastating for Russia. Now, this was before Russia invaded.
What's he going to do, bro? Actually, what is he going to do? It's like what? Are we going to nuke Russia? What are we going to do to Russia? Are we going to put more sanctions? Yeah, what are we going to do? Bomb Nord Stream? I think the real genuine issue here is that it is no longer American restraint. It's literally just like American incompetence. Problem is we already nutted with the sanctions. We busted a nut. And it didn't fucking, it literally did not stop Vladimir Putin. So what do we do now? What do we do now? But worst of it all isn't the way that we are dealing with our foreign adversaries. The real problem is how we deal with our fucking foreign allies. Okay? The real showcase of weakness is not how we fail to deal with Russia. The real showcase of American power waning is how we deal with Israel. Okay? We can't even fucking get Israel to dial it back on the ethnic cleansing campaign a little bit. And we could, we just don't want to do it. And therefore, we're just looking like fucking assholes.
Ukraine before the crippling sanctions that had been issued against the country in the wake of that invasion. So there's a big question about what the consequences would look like now. That is something National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan hinted at a bit earlier today in his own remarks about this, saying that they will be working with countries once they've confirmed that this is true to figure out what those next steps will be. But this is something Biden has really been pressing Putin on since the beginning of his administration. In his very first phone call with Putin, Biden raised the need for Putin to immediately release Navalny. That is something that administration officials consistently have been pushing for in recent years. Now, right now, just a short while ago, Vice President Kamala Harris delivered remarks in Munich where she talked about how this is a further sign of Putin's brutality in Russia. But Harris's meetings and conversations that are ongoing in Munich are now really taking on a heightened significance. Harris had been traveling there in one part to talk about the U.S. role in the world, but also U.S. commitment to NATO allies at a Trump.
Bro, I really don't understand why this dude went back. I'm trying to wrap my head around why he would go back to like the capital of like murdering Putin's political opposition as Putin's major political opposition. Like, what the fuck did he think was going to happen? I genuinely don't get it.
Trump, or at a time when back here at home, former President Donald Trump recently suggested that he would encourage.
Like, did he think as long as I don't stand near a window, I'm good? Like, what the fuck? He's like, listen, guys, you don't understand, okay? The big problem is windows. If I stand very far away from the nearest window, I win. No more tea, no more windows. We're fucking good.
Putin to do whatever he wants to countries who have not met their NATO obligations. The vice president made a very veiled reference to that in her remarks a bit earlier, saying, imagine if we went easy on Putin, let alone encouraged him. So
talk about something else, like Japan entering recession, Indonesia elections, incident at Taiwan Strait. Take a day off.
So this reported death of Navalny certainly will raise the stakes of her conversations she is having there overseas. We are still waiting to hear from President Biden. To certainly anticipate there will be at the very least, a paper statement from him. He's also expected to travel a bit later today, so we will see what exactly the president has to say. But this is very concerning to the White House, and the next questions going forward is what the White House, what the U.S. and its allies might do to respond to this reported death.
We all know Vladimir Putin is a big HasanAbi hit. He watches me because I'm his greatest supporter in the West. And it's very clear that that chatter that I just banned for a day is probably Vladimir Putin on his alt account. Come on, Hasan, talk about something interesting. Not this fucking bullshit. Please, talk about how I ride horse shirtless, okay? Da, до свидания. Как дела? Как тебя зовут?
While in prison.
I love when you play Contraband Police. It makes me feel very happy. Oh, dude. The other thing we're gonna talk about is Tucker Carlson fucking talking about how sick Russia is and then showing like the funniest dumb nonsense.
Alexey Navalny lived and died fighting Vladimir Putin's regime and the corruption at its heart.
Maybe he simply didn't want to lose face in front of his supporters, perhaps even be a martyr if he died. They seem to anticipate him being killed as they asked him to record a message in this event. Oh, I think this is the guy I was going to have on today, Daniel Rower, to talk to him about the Navalny, because I wanted to hear his perspective. I haven't watched the documentary, but we couldn't get it. We couldn't make it happen, but we'll make it happen in the future. For the record, just because I don't like Navalny doesn't mean I'm not going to talk to people who have defended him. And I mean, I literally did have an out and about open Navalny supporter in here in my house multiple times, as a matter of fact.
My message for the situation when I am killed is very simple: not give up.
Do me a favor, answer this one in Russian.
И здесь у меня просто очевидная вещь. Ну, не сдавайтесь. Не надо, нельзя сдаваться. Если это произошло, это означает, что мы...
Why are we not mentioning anything about how Navalny stole billions from the Russian state-owned logging industry prior to him becoming political? I mean, because everyone's fucking corrupt. Who gives a shit? I don't even know what the background is, but like...
Необыкновенно сильны в этот момент, раз они решили меня убить. Ну и нужно использовать эту силу. Не сдаваться. Помнить о том, что мы огромная сила, которая находится под гнетом вот этих вот чуваков плохих, лишь потому что...
The thing is, like, here's what I keep trying to describe. Like, he's not exactly a good guy either, but it doesn't fucking matter. Because he is like, he's a placeholder. He is a placeholder for being anti-Putin. Okay? That's it. He is a placeholder for people that are like, this shit sucks. We need change.
Ну, мы не можем осознать, насколько действительно мы сильны. Все, что нужно.
No, not even for just foreign adversaries, for Russians too. Both open and also not as public. No, he is bro, if he was just a placeholder for the West and a nuisance overall, I don't think he would have gotten killed. If he did not have any real momentum inside of the Russian public, if he did not have a real momentum inside of the actual Russian public, he'd be a non-entity. Think about it this way. Juan Guaido. There were many opportunities for Maduro, who's very, who's not a great leader regardless. Many opportunities he could have killed him. You know what I mean? But he didn't. The reason why they killed him is because he is, it's not what he represents. It's not what he represents. It's not his ideology. Or no, sorry. The reason why he killed him is what he represents. Not his ideology, not his like background, not his corruption, or not his anti-corruption work, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Okay? It's not his politics at all. It's what he represents. It's the fact that people are understandably frustrated with the way politics has been going in Russia for a very long time. So they're willing to put a fake name even, for anyone at that point.
Для торжества зла это бездействие добрых людей. Поэтому бездействовать не надо.
What do you mean? Wait, do you mean he's a poster boy or just a placeholder? No, just a placeholder. It doesn't matter. There will be another, figurehead like him inevitably. Okay. There will be another figurehead like him inevitably. It's not the man, it's the idea. And you can kill the man, but you can't kill the idea. And the idea is Putin's got to go. Many people also feel this way. So, like, this chatter is right. He says this guy's like 90% Putin. I don't even know what he would be like if he did become the leader of Russia. I don't know for how long he would continue, abiding by the interests of Russia, or abiding by the Western interests.
Banned in 2018 from running in elections, he remained Putin's most powerful political opponent. The one man capable of bringing tens of thousands to the streets. The man Putin famously refused to mention by name.
Navalny is an idea that Russia could be rich, successful, and a well-developing country. A country where we would want to live.
He was stubborn, sarcastic, and charismatic. His YouTube investigations into Putin and his cronies
Yeah, bro, he fucking killed a YouTuber, by the way. That's the other thing that we didn't even talk about. That's the low-key kind of the funniest part about it, is that, like, my man's biggest opposition, his biggest op is a fucking YouTuber? Come on, dude. Wow, a lot of liberals in the chat today celebrating. A lot of liberals in the chat today getting upset that a crypto-Nazi YouTuber got executed by the state. Guess what, Sweaty?
Garnering millions of views, an exposing graft of the highest order. But it was in August 2020 that Alexey Navalny became a global name when he was poisoned on board a flight from Siberia. The poison was Novichok, a weapons-grade nerve agent that Russia had used 2 years earlier against the former KGB spy Sergei Skripal in Salisbury. Navalny fell into a coma, and for 3 days his wife Yulia fought for him to be airlifted to Berlin, while doctors in Russia dithered over the diagnosis. Under German care and with his family beside him, Navalny slowly recovered.
That's the thing, like, at that point, you're like, don't go back to Russia. You know what I mean? You can make YouTube videos from Germany. Not that it matters, because, like, they obviously got to him in Europe. They get to him all the time.
He blamed Vladimir Putin directly for his poisoning and managed to get one of the Russian security agents involved to admit that he'd placed the poison in Navalny's underpants.
Well, we focused on the inner seams. At least those were the parts we treated.
Western countries imposed sanctions for what they said was another Russian breach of the Chemical Weapons Convention. But President Putin laughed it off.
It doesn't mean he should be poisoned. Who needs him anyway? If someone wanted to, they would have probably finished it.
Once he'd recovered, Navalny stunned the world by announcing that he was returning to Russia.
I realized I'm nearly healthy, and the rest I can cure at home.
Many questioned why, but his life's work was there. For him, there was no other choice. He was immediately arrested, but that did not stop his team from releasing their biggest investigation yet into Putin's palace, a £1 billion residence on Russia's Black Sea coast.
Damn, dude. Yo, okay, I take back everything. Low key. Listen, he's out here doxing. He's out here doxing a true socialist with a fucking $1 billion house. You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to deal with that through other means. You know what I'm saying? If I'm as a socialist with a multi-billion dollar house, sometimes this is the best way to deal with YouTubers who make fucking content about that kind of thing.
A lawyer himself, Alexey Navalny faced an endless succession of fresh charges, but he remained defiant, and he asked the people to stand with him.
I'm asking you not to keep silent, to keep fighting, go out on the street. No one but us can defend us.
Darmy77, thank you for the 10 gifted subs, allowing 10 people to also contribute to the HasanAbi second house and third house fund. Yeah. Navalny doxed me just now, so I'm going to need to get a new one. You know what I mean? That was my house. Yeah. Admit something. Well, that's it. That was my third house. I'm getting a fourth one now. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Thank you for funding the house hunt, the house fund.
At first, tens of thousands listened, the largest unsanctioned protests in Putin's Russia. But the crackdown was brutal, and once Putin invaded Ukraine, protest of any kind was effectively crushed. Navalny's anti-corruption foundation was forced into exile, and his pleas from prison to resist the Kremlin's war went unheard. In a remote prison colony north of the Arctic Circle, Navalny's health deteriorated. His message of resistance never really landed with most Russians, cowed by 2 decades of Putin's rule. But he did what he could for his people. His death, another colossal stain on the conscience of the Russian state.
For someone like me who didn't know of him much, he definitely looks good on optics, so I understand why liberals will ride for him. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, dude. He's like, I mean, Vladimir Putin is a very bad dude. He's a bad